needs to be hit on the head with a sledgehammer in order to have any herbal effect. So I would use the linden flower in that case to help lower the blood pressure. So then again, these two herbs would have a complementary effect in compound, and they would be better than using any single herb by itself. And you might use them at 50-50. You might use them at a 50-50 percentage. That would probably be good. So let's have the lights on, and the first compound that I wanted you to put together is, and we could have like, I think we could have probably 6 people at a time up at these tables, so whoever feels like they want to get a stretch and make a compound right away, go ahead up to the tables. And our first compound that we're going to do, I'm a little bit apologetic that I'm so in charge of everything, and I'm not going to let you just make up your minds and put things together by yourself. But it was complex enough to put together all the tinctures that you need for these different formulas. The idea, of course, is to create a library of simples, all the different simple herbs on the shelf in amber bottles and cool, and then as need arises, you can go ahead and take those singles and combine them together at will. But in the case of our program today, we have quite a few tinctures already available, and you can go ahead and Spilanthes, which is right here on the wall. They've changed, the taxonomists love to change the names. It's now Acamella oleracea. The Spilanthes is a sialagogue. It moves the saliva, and if you stimulate the mouth, then you begin to stimulate the whole body immunity. You also improve digestion because you're improving your body's ability to begin enzymatic activity on food right away. It's also an anti-spirochete herb, so blood spirochetes are killed or disarrayed in their life cycle by Spilanthes. Zika virus, think malaria, Lyme. All of these are problems with blood spirochetes, and so it's a great dentifrice, isn't it? I had a woman who was going to her dentist, and her dentist was like, "Oh, your gums are terrible. They're all boggy, and you got a 6 here and a 5 there. You know how they do that thing. It's so boring, and it's it costs so much money, and you never hear anything about it again. They just go through and they, you got a 1, you got a 2, you got a 3. Well, she had like 4s and 5s. And then I said, well, just swish with Spilanthes when you do your toothbrushing. So she swished with Spilanthes. She went back 6 months later, and the dentist was so impressed. Oh, you're down to 1s and 2s with everything. What have you done? How is this possible? This kind of thing happens all the time with herbal therapy. You can really turn things around quickly. Your body recognizes plants as being a primary source of food, primary constituents, and your body also recognizes plants as being a primary source of assimilable, natural, functional, secondary constituents like flavonoids, like polysaccharides, like alkaloids, saponins, all of these different pharmaceutical classes that that us herbalists throw around are recognized by the body for creating specific reactions from the different body organs. And each herb will have an affinity for a different part of the body. So that's something that can certainly be taken into account. In the case of Spilanthes, it definitely has an affinity for the salivary glands. It's a sialagogue. So we're going up here to these 2 different places. We're grabbing the Spilanthes tincture, and then we're going to use another herb along with that to basically to correspond with the Spilanthes and make it a little bit stronger. And the next slide actually is going to give us a picture of coriander. Go ahead, Jerome. We can still see it. Coriander, cilantro. This is also a really good herb for the mouth. Anybody who has any lead fillings, the lead can slowly seep into your body and create multiple system breakdown. And what the coriander does is it helps move that toxicity out of the body. It chelates heavy metals. And so we're taking the Spilanthes, we're mixing it up with coriander, and we're making our first herbal compound at 70% of the Spilanthes and 30% of the coriander. Often, I had actually this lecture in mind and did some tincturing and some oil making at home during the summer and took some photographs of different things. And I wasn't able to make as much coriander tincture as I would have liked. So let's just put in 30%. We're going to have to do it, otherwise this lecture isn't going to move on. So we need 6 people up there and 6 people over here. Who has some? There we go. Please, please. Don't be shy. First of all, find your coriander and your Spilanthes tinctures. And bring those to the front. Yeah. Okay. And you're going to be using the graduated flasks. So probably the coriander will be the limiting factor. If you want to make 100 ml, then you can go ahead and use 30 ml, which is about an ounce of coriander, and then 70 ml of the Spilanthes. And if you're brave, take a little taste of the 2 ingredients before you put them together. Okay? And then take a little taste of the compound after it's mixed together. And pour it off into the larger beaker, and then kind of swirl it around. And then you'll see 1 ounce bottles up at the table as well. And after you swirl it around, you can pour it off into the 1 ounce bottles, put in a dropper, and put on a label. Just like that.
Tastes like coriander.
We've got one question.
I was wanting to know if any of these are okay to have while in nursing when you're pregnant? Like any of the plants that you mentioned?
So the question is whether there are pregnancy or lactation contraindications involved with any of the herbs. And I don't see that in terms of Spilanthes and coriander, especially because you're not really taking them internally. This is an external switch. So what you can do is after you make your mouthwash, you put a dropper full in some water at the bathroom sink, dilute it a little bit. It's pretty strong to take straight, and this take a swish it around in your mouth, and then spit it back out again. So this is actually a kind of external use. Now, in terms of pregnant, yes? Tulsi tea, is Tulsi tea okay to take during pregnancy? Yes. Tulsi tea is fine to take during pregnancy and for nursing. Sometimes the effects of the herbs go through the milk to the baby, and so, for instance, laxatives are something that you want to be really careful about in terms of taking during lactation, because you might not have enough diapers on hand. Yeah. And if you're going the diaper-free baby way, then the mess is really 3 times as bad. So yeah, watch out for that. Then also, let me just lift this up real quickly. This is my book, Making Plant Medicine, which just came out in the 4th edition. and is available for sale today at the reduced price of $20 because they're usually $25 if you buy them on Amazon. And so if you can afford it, make sure to get one of these. It has a formulary in the back. A formulary is basically a listing of medicinal herbs and their activity, a kind of a recipe book. And then for each herb, it's going to give you the contraindications. And the contraindications for pregnancy would be do not use during pregnancy, listed as do not use during pregnancy, or low dose, external use only during pregnancy, this kind of thing. One herb that I use freely is comfrey, but I really don't use that with pregnant people because it's been shown that you can the fetus can contract veno-occlusive disease, which is quite health challenging and can be fatal. And so, comfrey, I really don't encourage internal use of that during pregnancy. But I try to give a really level-headed assessment in making plant medicine according to, instead of like an industry scare, I'm trying to use like what I know from 30 years of prescribing herbs to people and seeing what kinds of reactions might occur, and also look at the literature and make sure that I understand the chemistry and what kinds of compounds might be in there that would be adverse to your health. Then also, what was Galen said, toxicity is a function of dosage, basically. So a lot of times, if there are herbs in the formula that have a strong effect, then you use less of them. You use the least amount that is really necessary in order to create the desired effect.
How are we doing?
You are so welcome. Yeah, your questions are really welcome and just drive the subject matter deeper.
Okay, so we're going to 30 years to 70 and 50 years to 100.
Rinse out your tools after you're done, so that we can go into the next column.
Anytime you're doing a ratio, we've got 100%, right? 100%.
Is there a question?
We're going to do a 30, 70, like that.
Okay, so my question is about growing golden
Over here,
seal. I had
we
gotten
wanna work
some
with
roots
50.
from you years ago, and I planted them under a willow tree so they'd be in the shade, but they're not doing very well. Should I be digging those up and dividing the roots up on a semi-annual or on an annual basis or biannual basis?
Well, golden seal, as you know, is a long-lived herb of the woodlands, and so a year to a golden seal plant is nothing much. It could grow for 100 years. So digging and replanting is not needed. But if it's not doing well and there's still life force there, then it might make sense to do a transplant to a better location. It needs what it really wants in terms of sun is it wants dappled sunlight, the dappled sunlight of the cove, the hardwood forest. And it might be getting too much light underneath a willow tree, so maybe you need to move it in under the ashes and oaks and gum trees and the mixed hardwood forest. That would work better. You want to look to the substrate. You always want to look to the roots, because the aerial parts are simply a reflection of what's going on below. What we say is, instead of the old adage, as above, so below, which is used by contractors when they realize that their cement sidewalks are being cracked up by the roots of a oak tree, we say as below, so above. So what we really want to do is concentrate on on the appropriateness of the soil that the plant is planted in, which is why you might want to transplant it. and a 70% shade cloth and a mister work really well for golden seal. So you can set up a golden seal bed that has water as a mist that you can turn on twice a week or 3 times a week, depending on the humidity of your area. Where are you from? Madison, Wisconsin. There's no reason why you can't grow golden seal in Madison, truly. You just need to have that dappled sunlight and a forest-derived soil. If the soil is tending towards prairie, it's grassy, you know, then that's not really forest-derived. Forest-derived is a layering of forest detritus on an annual basis. I say the trees are doing the farming, basically, because they drop their leaves, the leaves rot down, humic acid is produced. This is a mellow nutrient for golden seal, and when it's happy, it'll begin to spread. It will flower, fruit, and then begin to self-seed, which is what we call naturalization, when the plant actually reproduces in situ. Then you know it's happy. So yeah, you need to transplant, and now is a good time. This is right when golden seal, I mean, no golden seal looks happy right now. It's all going down, as we say. And so now is a good time to transplant. You transplant in the fall into appropriate environment, and then the root does not stay stagnant or there's no stasis involved. As soon as you plant the root, it begins to produce feeder roots. And I found this time and time again by experimentally, you know, digging up roots that I planted a week or two before in the fall weather. They'll have a lot of new rootlets growing out. And what that's doing is it's creating a underground network of nutrient assimilation, feeding the rhizome, storing food in the rhizome for the winter, and then in the spring, the plant comes up much more vigorously off of that already established root system. Yeah. And you are so welcome.
Still talking about golden seal, how about farther south? Could I grow it, say, in Oklahoma around scrub oaks?
We have a plant which really likes winter dormancy. So if you're in zone 8 and up, then it's not really appropriate to grow golden seal. But if you're in zone 7, then you're in the same zone as me. And I grow golden seal very effectively. And here, here's a copy of my next remake of an old book. This is called Growing at Risk Medicinal Herbs, Cultivation, Conservation, and Ecology, which originally was produced with the cooperation of United Plant Savers about their at-risk list, which is 22 different herbs from North America that are being over-harvested or lost through environmental degradation and all that negative and unpleasant stuff. So what I did was I went in and I excised all of the negative and unpleasant stuff from the entire book and put in instead inspirational information about bringing these plants closer to you and how you can really do it, how you can really grow these things, and it's extremely detailed information. So there's also a distribution map for every herb showing where it originally grew in North America. And so if you check the distribution map and you're within the black portion of the map, then you're in. So here you go, you can look for golden seal and check it out. Just ignore my little side notes. That has to do with crossing out the negative stuff and putting in the positive stuff.
You talked about using the golden seal leaf as well as the rhizome. When do you harvest the leaf?
The question is, you talked about using the golden seal leaf as well as the root and rhizome, which is known as the root, when do you harvest the leaf? So I had the same question, and so I did some analytical work. And what it showed was that we still had the presence of the active flavonoids that are the compounds of interest in the fall after the plant produced its berry, which was really good because you don't really want to pick the aerial parts of a plant before it's had a chance to reproduce. The plant starts to not like you. So you want to let it make its berry, complete its intention to reproduce itself. And then in the mid to late summer, after the turkeys have come and eaten the berry, and the leaf is still there and it still looks pretty good, it's maybe getting a little bit wilty and yellow, then you can pick it. In fact, if you want to, you can pick the whole plant at that time, the root and the leaf, and dry it to get, wash it, dry it, and make your extract at that time from the whole plant. And this is called whole herb, medicine making. And you make the medicine out of the whole herb. We said that right in the beginning. All of us said that we want to use the whole herb, but the reality was we weren't using the whole herb. We were just saying that we wanted to use the whole herb. Now we're doing the science. We're finding out that in many cases the whole herb does work better than a part of the herb, because the reality is that the chemistry of these plants is going to be different in the root versus the aerial parts in many cases. And so, it makes a difference as to whether you're using the fruits or the roots or the bark or the shoots. All these different things are going to have different activities in many cases. You go with tradition. Tradition is really safe. Herbs, used to be the only medicine that people used, with the exception of, a few other little categories like minerals, heavy metals, and excrement. But now we're herbalists. We use herbs, and we only use excrement when there happens to be a little bird poop on one of the leaves. So in this case, the entire plant is working so much better. And you see a lot of the pharmaceutical companies will do their own double-blind studies of herbs, and they're going to tell you that this herb doesn't work. But the reality is that as we all know, the efficacy of the herbs is only as good as the herbs themselves, and it also has a lot to do with the certain ethereal aspects, which include, your good intentions when digging and making the medicine. We always say stirring the love. If you can just remember that there's no difference between you and I, then suddenly the love can flow, and we can just get rid of all this societal baggage, and we can really, really communicate, and we can have so much fun, Then it's the same thing with herbalism. If it's somebody who doesn't trust the herbs and they're doing the experiment, then it's already one mark against the herb, for sure. Another thing is, it's all placebo bound. So they're going to give a placebo at the same time, which means that the person who's getting the plant doesn't know whether it's the plant or not. So there's no faith there. They think they might be getting empty calcium, instead of echinacea. So of course, these studies are going to show that the herbs don't work, because we've already taken the heart out of the matter, and now it's just the science. And we can really get involved with all kinds of scientific principle, and that has no real clear effect on our lives. So if we put that love in there, it's the love and the science. Sure, I use a microscope, but I also, smell I also use my senses. So I don't throw out any aspect of technology or any aspect of spirit. I think that it's all useful. It's a kind of a, mental compound, if you will. We're putting things together that way. All right, so did we have a good time with our Spilanthes and coriander? Do we have some testers that we can send around so that everybody can get a little test? I would like a little test. Is there a bottle of the Spilanthes and coriander somewhere?
There was, but I don't know, somebody took, there was a couple of extra ones.
Is there one that's not extra that I can try? Can you hand one up here? Thank you. Just stay here, I'll give it back to you. Should be good. Yeah, so now, when we taste the Spilanthes coriander, we can definitely get the effect of the Spilanthes, that sialagogue effect. And that's stimulating the fauces, that's stimulating the beginning of our digestion, the beginning of our immunity. And then we can also taste the coriander as a very, for most people, is very pleasant. Actually, there are some people who are genetically predilected to not like coriander or cilantro. And so if you're that person, please don't take this compound. You don't have to sacrifice yourself on the altar of today's first compound. That's not necessary. But most of us do like to have a little cilantro on our taco. And if we do, then this is going to be a compound that's going to work really well for us. Another question.
The cilantro, are you using the whole herb with this? Say coriander to me is the seed, cilantro is the herb. Are you using all of it, or just the herb, or just the seed?
The question is, Deborah, can you advance us to the next slide? The question is, on the cilantro, are we using the herb or the seed or just the herb or just the seed, or what's going on with that? You know, cilantro is one of these interesting herbs that's really two herbs in one. We have the cilantro, which is the green part, and we have the coriander, which is the seed. So they even have different, basically the two parts of the plant have different names in use. Then for my purposes, what I was using was the green seed. I really like the green seed. The green seed has the green energy of the plant, and it also has the high volatile oil content of the seeds. So you can see here, there's a picture of the coriander, this in the bucket. That's after I've shaken the plants later on in the year. I shook them one last time before I came down here. I had a 100-foot row and I got 7 pounds of coriander seeds from it. So this is like the root of my agricultural model for anybody who's a practicing herbalist and grows a lot of their own herbs. Grow a few plants well. A few plants very well. That way, you don't go crazy with trying to take care of all these babies, and they're all getting weeded up, and that they're being compromised by those weeds. I go for a few, like 12 or 24 or 100-foot row at max, and I find that if I grow those plants well, then I get a lot more yield than growing many plants poorly. And I'm a lot happier with the whole situation. Amma has asked us to concentrate on growing heirloom seeds. She has often mentioned this to my family because we're seeds people. And so I did experiments this year with growing 7 different kinds of beans. Beans are selfers. They're leguminosae. They have closed flowers. They can be grown close together and harvested, and they won't hybridize. So we grew all these different kinds of beans because they are heirloom varieties that you can't find anywhere else. I started them from like four bean samples years ago, and I've kept the same ones going. Inca pea beans, Madeira maroons, Christmas limas, Apache Trail of Tears green beans, or Cherokee Trail of Tears green beans, the Anasazi cave beans, which supposedly were discovered one time in the Southwest in a sealed ceramic pot that had pitch around it, and were taken out, and they're supposedly fartless beans. But in any case, I take a very small handful of beans in the spring, and I plant them, and I take good care of them, and in 100 days, I have dry beans on the plant, and I harvest them, and I get 8 pounds of beans. So from a bare, spare handful of seeds, I get 8 pounds of food. Dried beans, 8 pounds, is enough to feed a family for 2 or 3 months. And that's only 100 row feet. So there you have, your sustainability of protein source right there. Yes, a question.
Yeah, question was going back to tulsi. I've tried to grow tulsi in the plant in a pot with 0 success. I live here in the Midwest. Any help with that?
The question was, I've tried to grow tulsi in the pot with 0 success. Is there any comment that we might have about that? Plants need light. Plants need about 6 hours of light minimum to be happy. Plants that are outside are intrinsically more happy than plants that are inside. There are a few kinds of plants, like certain succulents, African violets, and what have you, that have been selected for inside growing. But tulsi, and tulsi can be grown inside with some success, but it's usually not as happy inside in a pot as it is outside. Some of the common mistakes I see in tulsi production inside are too much water, which is a very yin condition and is cold, and not enough light, and the light is yang and hot. Lack of natural light. So people are trying to grow tulsi underneath grow lights, and grow lights are fine for starting plants early in the spring, but I find that basically trying to grow plants onto a larger size under grow lights usually leads to a lot of unpleasant affectations, like for instance, you have spider mites really will start to affect the growth of the plant, and the plant will become etiolated. Etiolation is where it's just reaching for some real light, and it can't find it. Or it gets burned by the lights, or the cycles are not natural, because you're going to, every plant is going to be very much tuned into the cycles of night and day. And so this should be really accurately matched. The best results are when you use 100% compost, well-aged compost, in a large pot, and put the plant in a very sunny position, the sunniest window of the house, and water it only after the surface becomes dry. If you do that, then you can grow tulsis inside the house, and sometimes you have pretty good results. Other than that, what I really suggest is planting the Kopur tulsi, which is the temperate, amenable tulsi. And this, we actually even sell the seed in 10-gram packets, because you can take a 10-gram packet out to the garden and just basically broadcast it, cover up the seed with soil, tamp it down, keep it moist, and you'll have thousands of tulsi plants that do really, really well through the summer. So that's the direct seeding method, and I encourage you to use more seed and more natural conditions. I think you'll have better luck. So yes, another question.
Yes, what's the difference between the 4 different types of Tulsi?
The question is, what's the difference between the 4 different types of Tulsi? And we're going to move on after this question. You know, Tulsi, basils are outcrossers. They're Lamiaceae, they're mint family, right? And so outcrossers have a tendency to demonstrate a great deal of variation. And so it's been almost embarrassing to work with the Tulsis over the years and get all the different input from different people who say this, you know, this name isn't right, it should ascribe to that plant. This plant doesn't look right, it says too green of a leaf, it should have purple stem. It's endless. So we have basically worked up 4 or 5 different cultivars which demonstrate certain characteristics, and we plant them discreetly in different places, and we collect seed from them, and we're trying to maintain these 4 different cultivars. There are probably scores of different cultivars in India. So the difference between the ones that we grow are the Kapoor is the temperate, amenable, annual Tulsi, which it doesn't even exist in India. We don't even know where it came from. We'd like to figure that out. The Krishna is dark colored. Think of Krishna as a dark colored god. The Vana is Ocimum gratissimum. That's the bush basil that grows all throughout India and East Africa, where I like to go and botanize a lot. I find that one growing. It has a very fuzzy leaf, and it's very high in the eugenol aspect, which is the oil of clove, basically an essential oil that has a lot to do with the aromatics of the herb, and also makes it be really